All right, we'll start right on time if you all are ready. So first I want to thank you all for spending your valuable time with us here at AVI Live 2019 Minneapolis edition. Have you all had a chance to enjoy this venue? Who's taken the tour? Only a couple of you? I think there might be another tour left. If so, I'd highly recommend it. At least spend some time looking out the window. I find it quite distracting here. It's probably the coolest venue we can use for something like this. So we're calling this session, I should introduce myself, I apologize. My name's Doug Brown. I'm with AVI Systems Enterprise practice, pardon me. And I'll tell you more about our practices here in just a little bit. We've got some slides farther down. But we're calling this session Platform First. And really what we're talking about in terms of platforms is unified communication and collaboration platforms. So a little show of hands if you help me. Who's familiar with Zoom Rooms, Microsoft Skype for Business, Teams? So those are the things we're talking about. Now, we'll review some of these common platforms. We'll talk about some of the features and how they differ. And we're going to get to AVI Systems reference system designs. So these are some solutions that we've developed particularly for unified communications within conference room spaces. Now, it's certainly not the end-all be-all, but they're a good starting point for discussions about how we can deploy unified communications, those platforms we're talking about, specifically in those conference room environments. So we talked about the term platform. It's a kind of a new thing. Traditionally, we've described AV meeting spaces by their function. We call it a huddle room or a conference room or a training room. Sometimes we add a little caveat about the size. But we knew what we would expect if we talked about a huddle room. It's a small room for 4 or 5 people to gather, some presentation capability. But we didn't, if we had video, when we had video, if a room was video enabled, it was a standards-based video conference endpoint or codec. Pretty much a given. It's not true anymore. Now, we qualify and we precede the description of huddle room, conference room, or training room oftentimes with the flavor of unified communications, a platform that we want to use. We talk about it as a Webex room, a Zoom room, a Microsoft Teams room. And the question is why? Why has this come up and what do we do about it? So the shift really has to do with interoperability or the lack thereof, lack of standards. That standards-based video conference endpoint would communicate with another standards-based video conference endpoint. It didn't really matter which one I chose. If I said I have a video-enabled room, I was pretty sure I could call your video-enabled room. But the platforms we're talking about now are proprietary. Brand A doesn't communicate with brand B, not unless we put some kind of third-party interoperability solution in place. So it's important when we talk about adding this to our rooms, to our conference rooms, that we are specific about which one we want to use. And certainly we want to be consistent. We want to stick with the one we've chosen as we go on. So I'm going to tell you I want a Zoom room, a Zoom huddle room, not just a huddle room. And with this, because these collaboration platforms are so IT intensive, it takes considerable IT participation to roll out the platform and to deploy the room systems. We find that our customers changing. That no longer is it the facilities department who drives these requirements, but it's really the IT manager who's involved and is going to be responsible for maintaining these rooms afterwards. So let's take a look at these platforms. I mentioned some of them before. We have Zoom, Skype for Business, formerly known as Link, Microsoft Teams. I had to think and remember what the one on the left is. That's a Webex Teams logo, the colorful circle. Also Webex Meetings. We got a Polycom symbol. We'll talk some more about that. Now, these unified communication platforms that we're talking about originally really developed and used at the desktop, right? So how many of you routinely make either Skype or Teams or Zoom calls from your desktop? Quite a bit. How many do it routinely from conference rooms? A little bit less. Some challenges involved there, certainly. Right? The anatomy of the collaboration space was shown as a graphic here. The central point is a computer, and that really becomes probably the rub here. We need to run our collaboration software on some computer, might be a Windows machine, might be a Mac. It could be some other appliance indeed. Then we use USB peripherals for our cameras, microphones, speakers. Sometimes it's a USB capture device to ingest our presentation content. I don't have a laser pointer, y'all can see. Often with these systems, we're going to include a user interface, some kind of tablet or touchscreen device running the user interface software, and then point it back to our computer over the network. So it can be simple as an Android tablet or an iPad there. We've got our presentation content on some kind of BYOD device typically. And while we might ingest it with that HDMI capture, more often we're going to join the call with our device, or we're going to use either the platform-specific wireless presentation capability, or maybe one of the standard Miracast or AirPlay standard kind of screen sharing to share content from our BYOD device. So we'll start with Zoom. Maybe the fastest growing, one of the more popular solutions. It is a well-designed platform. It's subscription-based system is quite affordable. And one of the things we like about it, users like about it, is Zoom Room systems. And here again, I'll be specific about the version of these systems that we deploy in conference room spaces versus what we do at our desktop. There is significant differences, and we'll talk about it here. But what makes a Zoom Room system is that we're going to lock down that hardware. We're going to use our small form factor PC or maybe Mac Mini for one exclusive use. We're going to run this software, and we're not going to let anybody escape out of that and use that machine for anything else. Our user interface, we remove the keyboard and mouse, and we're going to use tablet of some sort typically with the standard Zoom user interface so that it's familiar and consistent between spaces. Similar to what we might find on our desktop, but different in the fact that I can't launch another application. I can't use the same computer that might be installed underneath my conference room table or behind the monitor as the source for my PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to use that on a BYOD device and through one of the methods I mentioned before, share that with the call with participants. Yeah, please. Well, one of the issues, if we allow users, so the question was, she doesn't have a microphone, why do we want to prevent users from using the installed room machine for something besides our video conferencing? So there's one option. You could bring in, why are we using our BYOD device as the content engine, as the source for our, no? I should get a microphone.
There must be a problem you're solving by having a dedicated laptop for that conference room rather than each person just going onto Zoom on their own laptop connecting to the monitor.
Certainly. So I think I understand. So when we use this unified collaboration platform, Zoom in this case, on our own laptop, we typically are using a small web camera, local microphone, maybe a headset. That's difficult to extend to a large room. I don't want 9 people in the same conference room all using their own screen, own camera, and own microphones. So we're going to share. So we could have one person's laptop in this and say, you can plug into the room's USB camera and the room's USB microphone, and that can work. One of the problems, though, is our users may or may not understand that platform well enough to go into the settings and change from their built-in laptop's microphone and camera to the room system and get that properly configured. And really one of the points of this whole thing is we want an effective collaboration tool. We want to be able to start our meeting within moments of walking into the room, and fumbling with your own laptop, changing USB peripheral settings can be a very big issue. So I think that's the answer to the question as I understand it. When we can lock it down, then it becomes a simple-to-use system. Who was here for Gary Kay's address this morning, the keynote, first off? And he talked about the expectation of simple-to-use systems, that might be much more important than very capable systems. So your laptop, if I bring it into the room, could do lots of things for us. And yes, I could bring up my PowerPoint and share it there. I have lots of tools, but it's no longer simple. And some of us may be perfectly comfortable with that, and others might not. So again, that is the distinction between these unified collaboration platforms at the desktop and how we use them, and then how we move them to the conference room environment. And we've had plenty of experience in the last couple of years, successes and failures with doing that, and a lot of it revolves around that user experience and how prepared they are for using this tool in that conference room environment. So that was the distinction here. We can do Zoom 3 ways. That Zoom room system, locked down. We can do Zoom desktop app, as you described. We could bring that into that environment. And the last one is we can use a feature called Zoom Room Connector, a service, cloud or on-premises, that we can get from Zoom and use our standards-based endpoint. So if I have one of those video rooms that had my Polycom or Cisco endpoint, I can still do Zoom with it. There's a way to do that. So 3 different options, and that first and the last one are maybe the least risky. That middle one of using the desktop app in the conference room environment being the most risky. So Skype for Business, really very similar, has a lot of the same features as Zoom, but in the Microsoft environment we have some additional advantages. So integration with Outlook Calendar and scheduling, very easy with this. Not to say you can't do a Zoom, because certainly there's a plugin available for scheduling through Outlook. Now here we have some additional abilities to maybe attach files to our invites. We have the single click to join. You can get that done in most of these platforms with a with a Skype room system in a Microsoft environment. It becomes particularly easy. We have features for recording sessions and storing them in the O365 cloud. So if you are in that O365 environment, there are some significant appeal. There's some significant appeal for Skype for Business, not the least of which is it's really close to free if you're already buying a lot of O365 subscription services. So again, we can do it in 2 ways. We can do it like we do at our desktop, or we can do Skype room systems. Same as we said with Zoom, we're going to have a dedicated PC, a computer, or appliance, and we're going to have a user interface, very locked down by the Skype for Business folks. We have an interesting experiment going on right now in our lab in Eden Prairie AVI office with, I think, 5 currently different Teams or Skype room systems all lined up, and we're kicking the tires and testing them all. And as you walk down and look at the user interfaces, they're all a little bit different size and some different shaped tablets and some different mounts, but they're all virtually identical, and it's nearly impossible to tell the difference, and that's by design. We might have some different size and shape Skype room systems in different size and shape rooms, but we don't want our user experience to be different. If I walk in and know how to join a call in that little huddle room, I want to walk in and know how to join a call in that large training room. But this graphic, I'm pointing out here, this graphic, it does represent some of the options here. So in the middle is a Logitech Smart Dock room system. So it's based currently on, I think there's another slide, better one coming up, the HP Slice in using a Microsoft. Can't remember the name of the tablet. It's new. Remember, we used to use the Surface for the tablet. But there's an option like that. We have the Microsoft Surface Hub, or we will. We're currently between models, and a lot of you probably know that the original models disappeared last year. We'll get a new 50-inch supposedly here in July, and the larger 84 later after that. But that becomes an all-in-one solution. So there we've got our computer, our microphones, our cameras, our user interface, and the touchscreen all in one piece with that. And again, kind of like I mentioned with the Zoom connector, we can use a legacy endpoint, here shown a Polycom group series, with the appropriate interoperability hardware or infrastructure platform, I should say, and we can use those traditional codecs. And again, locked down. No Windows user interface, no way for people to get in and mess things up, really, at least if I pull the remote control from a Polycom-based room. So some different options for deploying Skype for Business there. Microsoft Teams, I bet a lot of you are aware, that is the next generation, really, of Skype for Business. Very soon we'll see migration away from cloud-based Microsoft or cloud-based Skype for Business to the Microsoft Teams. I think the on-prem Microsoft Skype for Business will continue to be supported for quite some time. But there are some advantages. Teams supports dual displays, something we couldn't really do with Skype for Business. Teams leaders can join a team member in with a single click. I got notes here. Oh, portable devices, mobile devices are kind of a challenge in this environment. I think a lot of the times when we have complaints about call quality, it ends up being a result of somebody at the far end with things like mobile devices. So a neat feature in Teams is the ability for mobile users to join in presentation only. It eliminates their microphone and speakers. They can see what's going on, but they can't cause problems. And I think on the roadmap, there's a proximity feature, which sounds interesting. We can start a Teams call on a portable device, wander through a facility, approach an available conference room with the functionality, and pop right up and say, hey, you're near this room. Do you want to continue your call in that room? And with a single click and then an accept of the call in that room, you'll be able to move from that portable experience to a Rooms experience. That sounds pretty neat. Looking forward to that. Again, here we're showing some examples on, I think, every one of these platforms, Zoom and the Teams and Skype certainly. The manufacturers or the software developers realize that their solutions are highly dependent on the hardware. It doesn't really matter how good their software is if we deploy the wrong hardware or configure it incorrectly. So all of them test and certify hardware peripherals. And by going to the website, you'll find updated lists of what they currently do support and approve for the hardware. So some of the ones from Microsoft Teams here for the room systems include the Crestron Flex. We see that HP Slice that I mentioned earlier. This one's with the Logitech Brio camera. Smart Dock here, and it's another Logitech, the meetup camera shown in that one. Webex Team, it's our fourth one, I think, here. And again, to make things even more confusing, well, I don't know who got there first, Microsoft Teams or Webex Teams, but now we're going to have competing teams. I'm not going to wager on a winner. Teams is kind of the next evolution of Microsoft Webex meetings. And again, there's software. I can join team meetings from my desktop with my laptop computer. And there's hardware solutions. And because Cisco is a hardware company and made hardware endpoints traditionally, they maybe have the best array of hardware choices. There's Webex room kits from very small, all-in-one codec appliance plus camera plus microphones and speakers and a little sound bar to some very advanced codecs with lots of inputs and outputs for large room systems. And as I mentioned, well, no, we were looking at the hub before. They have an all-in-one solution as well, where my computer, my touchscreen monitor, microphones, speakers are all built into one, particularly easy to deploy. Here's graphics of those. I got ahead of myself. So Webex board all-in-one on the left. The center shows one of those Teams room kits all-in-one. I'm sorry, yeah, no, soundbar format. So I described some of the hardware that's listed on those manufacturers' websites as compatible, but not a single one of them really, possible exception of all-in-ones, is a complete solution. Each one of those you need to fill in the gaps. We need to add some additional components, maybe the display as a minimum, mounts, the infrastructure and the room counts. So this can be fairly complex. We can't rely on these software manufacturers to really guide us through an entire integrated system, and that's what we do here at AVI. So as a reference point, we have developed these solutions to deploy unified communications platforms within the different platforms, different size conference rooms. I think we're going to take a little detour on the way because we've inserted a couple of slides here. So reference designs, here again, we'll talk about solutions for Webex, for Zoom, for Skype and Teams in different size spaces. And we have some more universal solutions as well. Sometimes we don't want to limit ourselves to a single platform. There's a reason why we want to be able to make Webex calls and Teams calls, and it's possible. We'll talk about some caveats and some ways we can avoid some trouble there. But here's my tangent. On our way to that, I wanted to mention AVI's practices and their competencies. Who has made it all the way to the end of the show floor at the AVI booth at the end? Who of you? Got a chance there to see and maybe meet some of our practice managers, some of their sales engineers, and guys like me who are in our enterprise practice. and talk a little bit more about what we do there. But in a nutshell, AVI Systems employs a good number of subject matter experts. A lot of training, certifications, a lot of experience, and we organize these groups of folks into the practices and make them available as a shared resource to all of AVI's 22, who's got the right count? 22 current regional offices. So we've got 5 of them listed here. Audiovisual really focuses on best practices in AV integration. Digital media covers digital signage, content creation, asset management. Broadcast, fairly self-explanatory. Enterprise, guys like me who work with our clients to develop kind of big picture technology deployment strategies that extend past a single project. So we have those longer term discussions about approving products and making those infrastructure upgrades that will eventually aid in individual projects, but usually can't be accommodated within the budget and timeline. And then unified collaboration, those are the guys who know all about the stuff we're talking today. Video conferencing hardware, legacy, standards-based endpoints, and then all of these soft codec options. So the reason we cert this here is the standard, or I should call them the reference design systems that we're about to talk about. They're a collaboration between the AV practice and unified communication practice. There is one more resource, an important one here when we're talking about unified communication, and that's the powered by AVI Magenium solutions. So again, Magenium's back with the rest of the practices, and they are a Gold Microsoft partner. They provide services and licenses across that entire Microsoft stack. So that includes the UC that we're talking about now, Teams, Skype for Business, Voice, and then in addition, all of the rest of the icons we can see here. So for some of our clients, Magenium will architect and execute an entire migration, an O365 migration. They can provide as much or as little help as our clients need in that manner. But we promised the reference systems. So here, we'll start with the Skype or Teams Huddle room. This one is based on the Crestron Flex B160. Crestron has it here. You guys get a chance to take a look. So it's soundbar format. That's what the B is on the B160. And it includes, within the soundbar, our microphone, speaker, and a Genius framing camera. And then in addition, there is the Intel NUC USB capture device. And then a TSW, tried and true Crestron touch panel. Now the difference here, that Crestron TSW panel, which we often generate a custom user interface, here we're talking about deploying the standard Teams interface, kind of a flick of a switch there, no custom programming involved. And as I mentioned before, it's going to be exactly like the user interface of all the rest of the Teams rooms that we come across. We've got furniture solutions as an option for every one of these reference systems. The attempt, or the idea, is to minimize the amount of infrastructure required in each of these rooms. When we use a system like this Mid-Atlantic Hub furniture system, we've got a place to store our equipment. We can mount the displays to the furniture and not to the wall, so it eliminates the requirement for in-wall plywood backing, power, data, AV cable paths, cordials at the table. Now, everybody doesn't need this, but it's good to have this turnkey solution reference, so we know if we didn't do anything else, if we didn't do any construction, could we deploy one of these systems? What would it do for us? What would it cost? And that's really how we use these reference systems. Fully documented, and in situations where they fit, we can move right ahead with deployment of these reference systems. They're scalable, so the next one is our Skype Teams conference room system. Based on the same hardware, the range of the camera and soundbar here will accommodate this larger 10-seat table, 9 really. Here you can see overfloor raceway. That again eliminates that infrastructure requirement. Larger room, we can do dual displays and make them a bit bigger. But a very similar, nearly identical user experience and the identical user interface. We can do a flavor of this for Zoom. Again, to the user, it's a lot the same. They're going to find that standard Zoom user interface. It should be familiar if you're a desktop user, and it should be identical to other Zoom room systems. Same kind of furniture with the same kind of advantages there. We can use that same Crestron TSW panel and again just enable it into the Zoom user interface mode without any additional programming. This one's using a Dell small form factor computer and the Logitech Meetup camera, which again is our USB camera, microphone, and speakers. Miss anybody in there? Optionally, we could do, this was the Magwell encoder here, USB 3 or HDMI to USB 3 capture device. So if we really do want that HDMI connection at the table so people can bring their laptops in and share content the way they're used to doing with their video conference codecs, their old Cisco and Polycom systems, it can be supported here. I see us doing less and less of that because we do have these other options for wireless presentation and utilizing the capability of the platform itself for sharing content. That Zoom room system can be, again, upsized from a huddle space to a conference room and a larger table. Here, doubling up on the monitors, making them bigger, and using expansion mic with the Logitech Meetup camera to cover the larger area. So some solutions for Webex Teams. I mentioned before that Cisco is a hardware company by nature, and they have more hardware solutions. This one shows the Webex Board 55. We've paired it up with an AVTech furniture solution, a stand that is ADA compatible, height adjustable. In addition, just ADA compatible, it's handy for short and tall users to be able to move an interactive display. I mentioned before, it's all-in-one. Our user interface is the display, is our collaboration interactive tool. Our PC's built in, or in this case, it's a Cisco codec built in, cameras built in, microphones built in, possibly the easiest to deploy here. Instead of that Huddle table we showed before, we've got a more conventional round table moved away from the interactive display to provide some circulation. It's really hard to use an interactive display mounted above a Huddle table, but then again brings back that over-the-floor raceway. If we happen to have a core drill at our table, we can certainly eliminate that. If we want to do Webex Teams in a larger room, again, there's options with those room kits. There's room kits plus, room kit pro. There's a room kit for just about every size room we might want here. And they'll have that video conference codec, our appliance here that runs Webex or Webex Teams, either built into a single piece, the monitor, the sound bar, or it starts to split out on the larger systems. We're showing that same AVTech furniture option. There's other choices, but that one works well as a location to house our equipment, hold our monitor. Here we use Cisco Touch 10 interface. Well, a lot of you are probably familiar with that. A very good user interface, consistent again now experience. And one of the neat things Cisco's done in the last couple software generations is given us the ability, shouldn't bring it up for reference systems because these we want to lock down, but Cisco Touch 10 now has the ability to be customized more than it used to control other peripherals in a room. I can control my lighting, I can control an auxiliary switcher. So there's neat stuff happening here with Cisco, Webex, and their Touch 10 user interface. But I mentioned before that we may not want to be locked down to a single platform. So what if I want to be able to do Teams and Skype in the same conference room? Well, we could bring in a computer, permanently install it there, or bring it in one at a time, and we could run both those applications. But now we've just compounded the problem we talked about earlier. Are my users going to be able to remember the difference between changing my microphone settings in the Webex app versus changing my settings in the Skype for Business app? What are the odds they're really going to be able to start these meetings on time and be successful? It's going to be less. So we want to look for a way in which we can still lock down our systems, eliminate a lot of that Windows shell or other operating system interface, and keep people out of trouble. So here we're showing a solution. It uses a new line display, all in one. I hope it's a new line. Yeah, that's a new line. Again, built-in microphones and speakers. There's an OPS slot to go in there, and we can install whatever applications we want. But instead of exposing the entire Windows interface to our users and having them wade through that with a keyboard and mouse or touchscreen, here we're showing the quick launch software. I think they're here. I haven't spent as much time on the floor as I'd like to have been stuck in the back there. Does anybody see quick launch in our show today? I guess it's my responsibility to tell you then. So we can run quick launch software on any Windows PC. It wouldn't make a lot of sense if we weren't doing this unified collaboration thing, but it will then lock down the machine. So I used that term before. It won't let us get to those Windows settings. It won't let us get to Windows applications that aren't allowed. And instead, it shows, that's pretty small, sorry. On the left side, it shows the room schedule with all of the scheduled calls. And that's something I probably glossed over earlier. One of the main objectives into scheduling our calls through Outlook, preferably if that's the platform we're going to use, is that when we walk into a room, it simplifies joining a call, right? I don't have to dial somebody. I don't have to look them up on the directory. I just have to say, well, there's my call. It's scheduled for 10 a.m. I can see my name right there. I hit join. What if I'm using multiple platforms? I'd like to see join buttons for my multiple calls from multiple platforms. And it seems like a tall order, but Quick Launch does it. That's part of its magic is when we set up our room resource account and start sending email invites to it as part of our Skype for Business or our Teams invitation, those invites will automatically be accepted based on room availability. And then Quick Launch will parse those emails. It'll identify what kind of an invite was this. Did it come from Skype for Business? Is it a Teams invite? Was it a Webex invite? It'll figure that out. It figures out what time that event is supposed to happen, and it will insert it right into that calendar entry along with a matching icon. So you can say, well, there's my Teams call. There's my Webex call. They're sitting right there all queued up, ready for me to one-touch join. And then how it joins those calls depends entirely on how we've set this up. If we have the desktop clients there installed on this machine, we'll configure it to launch those. And what's really cool is not only will it launch those, but it can launch those how we tell it to launch those, with the window sized and shaped and placed just how we want, maybe with dual monitors. And if we're going to use a web plugin to join a Webex call, well, we configure the Quick Launch software to know it should launch my favorite browser and use that web plugin to join the call. We can add what Quick Launch calls action tiles, those colorful buttons over on the side here, for any other applications that we do want to allow. Maybe we put one in here to log in to Office 365 and find my content that might be saved in SharePoint. And so that's how I'm going to do it in this room. I'll log in, I'll find my content. I can run it on this machine. I don't necessarily have to drag in my own laptop. And then the concern is, well, what am I leaving behind? I finished this meeting where I've loaded my own content that I've pulled down from the cloud. Well, there's room reset functionality built into this as well. So between every scheduled call, on a timered basis, or due to inactivity, the Quick Launch system will flush caches, close applications, and reset back to the default state. So it really helps with security. I think I probably beat that one pretty well. I like this one. You can probably tell I get a little excited about Quick Launch. It solves some problems for us. It allows us flexibility, allows us to do more things than the lockdown system. Not so many things that we get ourselves in trouble. So if we want to do this in a bigger room, well, I think I mentioned before, the practical limit for a touch screen is maybe around 80 inches. If it gets bigger than that, then short people can't reach the top, or I'm way down here and nobody can see what's going on. So if I got a big room with a longer viewing distance, I probably need a different solution. And one of the things we can do, as shown here, is use a Polycom Group Series endpoint, not in the traditional way, not as a standards-based endpoint for those H.323 calls, but I can register this, again, given the appropriate interoperability solution. I can register a Polycom endpoint with Skype for Business, or I can use it for Zoom calls. So I can have that same experience, and I can have that same kind of user interface, and I can have the reliability of that hardware endpoint and eliminate the problems that are typically associated with a room PC. So that's a possibility for us here. This particular system then uses the Polycom HDX digital microphones, which sound really good. We got ceiling golf ball versions. We have the little boomerang table versions. So we can get good quality audio and video. We can use that Polycom PTZ camera, the Eagle Eye. We can use Eagle Eye Director for tracking. So things open up here when we start using some of the hardware provided by those traditional video conferencing hardware providers. I feel I'm missing something on this one. Oh, one of the interesting things that's kind of hidden way up at the top here, you'll see occupancy sensor noted on that section drawing. So whenever possible, we want to simplify this user experience. We want them to walk into a room and immediately feel like they know what to do. One of the ways we can do that is use occupancy sensor to trigger some activity within the room. So here we could turn on this system as somebody comes in. We've got dual displays. We've got Crestron Air Media 2 in this one. I think they're showing Air Media out here. One of the neat things about Air Media, wireless presentation tool, right? So that I can connect to a Crestron Air Media with my phone, with my laptop, with my tablet, and wirelessly present. And that's cool, but one of the other good things about it is it has a customizable splash screen, right? So if I use my occupancy sensor to trigger my control system, to turn on the system and default to my Air Media on one screen and maybe the main screen from my Polycom on the other, I could customize that splash screen from the Air Media to tell people where they are. You've come into the Lake Superior room. It's this time of day. Here from the Polycom screen are the scheduled calls, or scheduled events, the calls that are scheduled here. And if you want to present wirelessly, here's how you do it. If you want to present wired, there's how you do it. So we can add some instruction using Air Media's customized interface that makes this room easier to use. So do these systems always fit? Man, how fast am I going? You know what? This is good news. We're way ahead of schedule because I talk really fast and I haven't let you ask any questions, but I will let you ask some questions. But the good news is happy hour starts halfway through this session, and I was feeling bad about that. So I think you guys are going to have an opportunity to get to happy hour at a reasonable time here. But so before I distracted myself, do these reference systems always work? Absolutely not. They're fairly simple systems for fairly simple requirements in very specific rooms, and you all don't have all that all the time. So the question is, can they be modified? Certainly. Comes down to this, our AVI's proven process. If we've got an exact fit, if you really understand your requirements, your needs, they're well documented, they match up with the reference design and the room size and shape is right, we jump right here to the pink, I don't have a pointer, to Pro Integration. Just sell it to you and put it in. Done deal. We're going to want to still deal with Pro Support. We want to make sure it keeps working for you. And at some point, we're going to consider its upgrades. But the point is, we can get right to it. What if it's not quite right? We're going to take a step back. I think this might be animated. There we go. We jump to Pro Integration. If it's not quite right, we'll go back and do at least some of our Pro design. We'll figure out what's different about your requirements or your room that's going to require some modification in this design. Make that modification. Good news, move forward again. Go into Pro Integration, take care of that Pro Support. What if you're not sure what your requirements are? They're not well documented. We don't have a target to shoot for yet. Well, then certainly we can't match you up with a reference design. We can't say this one's going to meet your needs. We don't understand your needs, and that's what pro development is all about. That's where I think makes and breaks a lot of our integrated systems. I think there's probably a whole good slide about it here. Yep. If we don't do a very good job of identifying requirements, that target we're shooting for, and the path we're going to take to get there, or maybe I'll put it the other way, let's be optimistic. When we do identify those needs and figure out how we're going to get there and how we're all going to agree that we've successfully completed it, then the rest is an exercise, right? It's one step after the other, and we just execute that plan. It's pretty easy when that happens. If we don't do a good job of identifying and documenting and agreeing upon our target, it tends to move throughout the process. We spend a whole lot of time chasing it. Our budget moves, our timeline moves. We often run out of one of those two things, money or time, before we actually get a firm grasp on that target. So that's me up here in my soapbox preaching a bit. I do want to make sure, and everybody understands that when we look at a reference system, it is critical that we do understand we're matching it up with the identified needs. And when we don't, we got a process. It's no problem. We just need to back up through our proven process here and pick it up at the appropriate part. So I think that's what the last slide is we want to be with you every step of the way, wherever you need our help in terms of that needs analysis, pro development, creating a solution, pro design, integration, and the support. We want to help. We want to be involved. Let us help, please. These reference designs are an easy place to start. A discussion about unified collaboration and communication, how it fits with your needs, using that as a benchmark and determining a good starting point is just that, a good starting point. I forgot to ask who was in the room. I probably could have done that earlier, but it works now too. So who is our end users? Who's our customers? Got a few in here. Who doesn't know or doesn't have an AVI account rep? Good, everybody knows their account rep. Oh, there's one. Sorry, I'll get your information before we go, and if you'd like, we can make sure we have somebody for you to contact if you want to talk more about these subjects. AVI reference designs, AVI's process, unified communications, any of our other practices. It's kind of the whole point here is we want to help you understand more about us and how we hope to help you. So we didn't have too many questions along the way. Who's got one now? There we go, please, thank you. Because it means I did a really good job or a really bad job, and there's no questions, and I always worry about the last one.
So how do you see the soft clients differentiating themselves going forward?
So we did kind of zoom past that, no pun intended. They have some subtle differences, certainly, right? And some of them are by design. For instance, we talked about Zoom. Oh, perfect. Say it again.
How are the soft clients going to differentiate themselves going forward?
All right. Question is, how are the soft clients going to differentiate themselves going forward? And a good place to start answering that is how do they differentiate themselves now? So somehow a different approach, right? Simplicity is better. We'll give up on some functionality. I said that when we talked about Zoom. Let's not use this computer for sharing content or running other applications. We'll lock it down. That'll make it easy to use. Versus somebody else who says, no, it's okay. We think you can handle it. Let's go ahead and give you some rope, some flexibility. I mean, and as the whole platform, all the platforms develop, they're going to find out what you all want, right? So what do we get today? We have the ability for video, audio, content sharing. Sometimes we have recording. If we like it, we'll get more of it. Sometimes we have interactivity, annotation. Sometimes we can share one application and both collaborate with it. So I think it's those features, and as we find out which ones are worth the squeeze, right? Which ones are just added complexity that don't really help us as much as they confuse us, and which ones are core features that everybody can use and makes their job better. So I don't have that crystal ball, but I think they're all going to jockey for position, right? They're all going to try and balance that. Simple to use, effective, efficient, features, and we're probably not going to see a single winner. Right? We're going to find some people who say, I really like that easy one. I really like that full-featured one. And we'll pay for what we get. A good question. Another one? Yes? So quick launch? So quick launch is pretty agnostic with the platforms. I can actually use quick launch to launch any application I want based on either, and I probably didn't repeat your question again, did I? The question is quick launch work with Webex Teams or Webex meetings? Is that fair? Right. And short answer is both, right? Because when I get an incoming invite, quick launch can parse that, can determine whether it was a Webex Teams or Webex meeting invite, and it can launch the appropriate client or web plugin. I don't know that a lot of people are going to support both Webex meetings and Webex Teams on their side. I mean, we can get an invite from somebody outside. That's easy enough. But I think we're going to make a choice there, right? It doesn't make too much sense to have a foot in both camps. Once we go to Webex Teams and we move to the cloud there as a requirement, I don't know why we would look back. But the quick launch is highly configurable. I think at last count there was at least 600 settings that I can manipulate in there to determine its response to either user interaction with those action tiles that we put on the screen that we made look any way we want to, with any graphics, any colors. Typically we'll match it up with the application they launch. But we could do weird things if we wanted to. On purpose, I could launch Webex when a Skype invite comes in by accident. So highly configurable for better or for worse.
Who owns Quick Launch?
Who owns Quick Launch? It is made by a company called UC Workspace. And I think they've got some other products as well, but that's the only one I've paid much attention to. And they're doing good business. They've got some big enterprise customers. There's a bit of a ramp up with them, right? It takes a long time. I say there's 600 things I can do with it. So if I ask you, which of these 600 things do you want to enable? You're going to look like a deer in the headlights to start. So it really takes a significant needs analysis phase there. Talk about the options, the possibilities, envision this whole thing. What works for you? What do you do now that doesn't work? And as you wade through that, we can start flipping a lot of settings on that quick launch and enable things that make sense for you and hide or eliminate the things that don't. Anyone else? Oh, everyone's thirsty? Tell you what, if you guys are ready, we can break. I'm going to hang for a little while there. If you think of something you want to ask or didn't want to ask in front of the group, by all means come up. If you haven't already made it back to the AVI booth, this is a good opportunity to meet some of those folks from the AVI practices. On your way, you can talk now. You've got maybe some more questions about the hardware and software we're talking about. A lot of the names we've mentioned are participating here in our vendor booth. So I hope that this maybe spurs on a little more conversation. Thank you all very much.